Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brothers and sisters, I want to start today with a question. A question that fills my inbox every single morning. A question that gets debated in Islamic study circles, whispered in the back of mosques, argued over in family group chats, and typed into search bars by millions of Muslims around the world every single year. And that question is this: is getting a tattoo halal or haram in Islam? Now, most people who ask me this question are expecting a one-word answer. Haram. Done. Next question. Move on. But tonight, I'm going to ask you to sit with me for a few minutes. Because the reality of this issue, when you actually go back to the texts, when you sit with the scholars, when you apply the proper methodology of Islamic jurisprudence, is considerably more layered than a single-word answer. There is one condition, precisely one, under which tattooing can be considered permissible in Islam. Not 10 conditions.
Millions of Muslims have never heard it properly explained. Before we go further, I need to address something head-on. Because I'm this ummah, when it comes to the tattoo question specifically, I see two groups of people making two very different kinds of mistakes. The first group consists of people who declare every single tattoo haram without any nuance, without any distinction, without applying the proper tools of Islamic legal reasoning. They hear the word tattoo and they shut down. They recite the hadith, they say haram, and they walk away feeling righteous. But they've actually done a disservice to the deen by refusing to think carefully.
The second group consists of people who have decided tattoos are completely fine because their local imam said so, because they watched a YouTube video, because they found one obscure scholarly opinion and clung to it like a lifeline. These are often people who already want a tattoo and are searching for permission rather than truth. Both groups are wrong. And today, with the texts, with the evidences, and with clear Islamic reasoning, we are going to settle this properly. Let us begin at the beginning. The prohibition of tattooing in Islam does not come from cultural tradition. It does not come from the personal opinions of medieval scholars. It does not come from some vague general principle about modesty. It comes directly from the authenticated Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. The hadith is reported in both Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, the two most rigorously authenticated hadith collections in existence. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "Allah has cursed the one who does tattoos and the one who has tattoos done, the one who plucks eyebrow hair and the one who has it plucked, and the one who files teeth for beautification, all those who alter the creation of Allah." Brothers and sisters, pause here. This is not a weak hadith. This is not a disputed narration. This is mutawatir level authentication, both Bukhari and Muslim, the two pillars of hadith literature. And the language used is severe. When the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, uses the word la'ana, cursed, in Arabic, this is not simply disapproval. This is not merely discouragement. A curse in Islamic terminology is one of the strongest possible expressions of prohibition. It is reserved for major sins, the kabair. You find this language used for bribery, for consuming interest, for oppressing the weak. This is the language of categorical, unambiguous prohibition. So let us be crystal clear from the outset. A permanent tattoo, ink injected beneath the skin with a needle, permanently altering the color and appearance of the skin, made for the purpose of beautification or self-expression, is haram. This is not one scholar's view. This is the consensus of the scholars of Islam across 14 centuries of jurisprudence. There is no legitimate scholarly disagreement on this point. Now, here is where we need to think carefully. Here is where the scholars have done work that most ordinary Muslims have never encountered. What exactly did the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, prohibit? He prohibited al-washam. This Arabic word refers specifically to the practice of using a needle or sharp instrument to inject pigment beneath the skin, creating a permanent, irreversible alteration to the skin's appearance. The key word here, and this is the one condition I mentioned at the beginning, is permanence. What Islam prohibits is the permanent tattoo. What renders something into the prohibited category of al-washam is its irreversibility, the fact that it is inserted beneath the skin, the fact that it changes the creation of Allah in a way that cannot be undone. This principle immediately raises an obvious question. What about temporary body decoration? What about things that sit on the surface of the skin, that fade and disappear, that do not penetrate the dermis? Every single one of you has encountered the answer to this question at a Muslim wedding. Henna, al-hinna, the reddish-orange plant-based dye that Muslim women, and in many cultures men as well, have applied to their hands, arms, and feet for centuries at weddings, Eids, and celebrations. Henna creates elaborate, beautiful patterns on the skin. By a casual definition, you could call it a tattoo. But is it prohibited? No. The scholars are unanimous on this. Why? Because henna does not penetrate beneath the skin. It sits on the surface. It does not permanently alter the skin's structure. It fades within days or weeks and disappears completely. It is temporary, and this is precisely the legal principle that draws the line. Permanence is prohibited. Temporariness is permitted, provided the content of the decoration is itself acceptable under Islamic guidelines. So when someone asks me, Sheikh, what about temporary tattoos? Stick-on tattoos? Temporary body art that washes away? My answer is, if it is genuinely temporary, if it does not use a needle to inject anything beneath the skin, if it sits on the surface and fades away, then it falls into the same legal category as henna. There is no major Islamic objection to it, provided the imagery itself is permissible, no immodest imagery, no symbols associated with kufr or shirk, no satanic iconography. The decoration itself must be halal in content. But the act of applying something temporary to the surface of the skin, that is not what the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, prohibited. Now I need to speak directly to something, because I know that among the people watching and reading this right now, there are brothers and sisters who already have tattoos, permanent ones. Maybe on your arms, maybe on your neck, maybe across your back or your chest, maybe you got them before you became Muslim, maybe you got them when you were young and ignorant of the Islamic ruling, maybe you got them in a period of your life when you were far from the deen, and you are sitting there wondering, am I condemned? Is my Islam incomplete? Is Allah going to hold this against me forever? I want to answer you directly, clearly, and I want you to hear this. Allah Azza wa Jal is Al-Ghafur, the repeatedly forgiving. He is Al-Rahim, the especially merciful. And the Quran contains a verse that every Muslim must know, from Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 286. Allah does not burden a soul beyond that which it can bear. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, and this hadith is reported by Ibn Majah and authenticated, whoever embraces Islam, Allah wipes away all of the sins that came before it. And the scholars of Islam add to this a principle that applies equally to those who were already Muslim, but acted in genuine ignorance. Sincere tawbah, sincere repentance, covers what came before. You do not need to surgically remove a tattoo to be forgiven. You do not need to undergo painful, expensive laser treatment to stand before Allah with a clean slate. In fact, on this point, the scholars are remarkably consistent. Tattoo removal involves significant physical pain, significant financial cost, and often produces imperfect results. Skin that has been tattooed and then treated with laser removal may be permanently scarred or discolored regardless. And Islamic jurisprudence does not impose upon a person the obligation to go to such lengths to undo something that was done before knowledge was acquired. Make your tawbah, be sincere, commit to not adding more. Continue your prayer, your fasting, your zakat, your obligations. Live as a good Muslim, and do not allow shaitan to use your past against you in a way that paralyzes your present. Your wudu is valid. Your salah is valid. The tattoo is beneath the surface of the skin. Water reaches the surface of the skin. Ritual purity in Islam is about the water touching the skin surface, not what lies beneath it in the dermis. This is the ruling of the scholars, and it is not a matter of dispute. Now, I want to discuss something that the vast majority of Muslims asking about tattoos have never considered, and it is something that matters enormously for specific individuals facing specific circumstances: medical tattoos. There are situations in modern medicine where permanent tattooing of the skin is used not for decoration, not for beautification, not for self-expression, but as a direct component of medical treatment. The first example, radiotherapy marker tattoos. In many cancer treatment protocols around the world, oncologists and radiation therapists make tiny, permanent dot tattoos on the patient's skin. These dots are precise geographic markers. They allow the radiation therapy team to direct high-energy beams at exactly the right location during each subsequent treatment session with millimeter accuracy. These dots quite literally help save lives. They ensure that radiation hits the tumor and not the healthy tissue surrounding it. Is this haram? No serious scholar would say so, and here is why. The Islamic legal principle involved is al-darura, necessity. The maxim in Islamic jurisprudence reads, necessity renders permissible what is otherwise prohibited. This is not an obscure principle. It is one of the 5 foundational maxims of Islamic legal theory, derived directly from the Quran and Sunnah. The second example, reconstructive tattooing after mastectomy. Women who undergo mastectomy, surgical removal of the breast due to cancer, sometimes undergo breast reconstruction surgery. As part of that reconstruction, physicians may use permanent tattooing to recreate the natural appearance of the areola. This is not vanity. This is not fashion. This is a woman who has suffered enormously, who has been through a deeply traumatic medical experience, attempting to restore a sense of wholeness and normalcy to her own body. The majority of contemporary scholars who have addressed this specific situation have ruled it permissible under the principle of medical necessity. The third example, tattoos to cover medically significant scarring. If a person has severe scarring from burns, accidents, or surgical procedures that causes them genuine psychological distress, and medical tattooing is determined by qualified physicians to be the most effective treatment available, the scholars are generally more permissive about this than they would be about purely decorative tattooing. The caveat here is important. The necessity must be genuine. A small scar that causes minimal disturbance is not a basis for permanent decorative tattooing, but documented, significant, medically recognized cases are treated differently. The fourth example, permanent makeup for medical conditions. Patients suffering from alopecia areata or undergoing chemotherapy may lose their eyebrows completely. Some may seek medical tattooing to restore the appearance of eyebrows. There is scholarly discussion on this, and while there is not absolute unanimous agreement, the majority of contemporary qualified scholars lean toward permissibility when the cause is medical hair loss rather than a desire to reshape cosmetically normal eyebrows. Why does the medical context change the ruling so dramatically? Go back to the hadith. What did the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, say was the reason for the prohibition? Altering the creation of Allah. This phrase is the key to understanding the entire ruling. The prohibition targets arrogance. It targets the impulse to look at what Allah gave you and say, I want to change this permanently because I prefer something else, because the culture around me values something different, because I want to follow a trend. Medical tattooing does not come from that place. It comes from a genuine medical need. It comes from a doctor's prescription. It comes from an attempt to restore health, function, or normalcy after illness or injury. The underlying motivation is fundamentally different, and in Islamic jurisprudence, motivation, niyyah, combined with the framework of necessity, changes the ruling. I need to address this directly because I hear it regularly. Young Muslims say to me, Sheikh, my tattoo is a verse from the Quran. My tattoo is the name of Allah. My tattoo is an Islamic geometric pattern. Surely that makes it different, right? Surely religious content makes it permissible? No. I say this with full respect for the person asking, and I understand that their love for the deen is genuine. But I owe you the truth, not the answer you want to hear. The principle in Islamic jurisprudence is al-ghaya la tubarriru al-wasila. The end does not justify the means. Good intentions do not convert a prohibited act into a permitted one. If the act itself falls into the prohibited category, good motivation does not change its legal status. But more than that, tattooing religious content introduces an additional and very serious problem that people who have these tattoos often did not think through in advance. If you have the name of Allah tattooed on your arm, what do you do when you enter the bathroom? What do you do when you are in a state of major ritual impurity, janaba? What do you do when you pass through spaces where the open display of divine names is considered disrespectful according to the Sharia? You cannot remove it. You cannot take it off. In many situations, you cannot easily cover it. You have permanently attached sacred text to a body that will be in states of impurity, will enter bathrooms, will engage in intimate relations for the rest of your life. This is not a shortcut to piety. Piety lives in the heart. Piety is demonstrated through actions. Piety is the Fajr prayer made before the sun rises, the zakat paid without anyone watching, the tongue held when anger rises, the truth told when a lie would be easier. Piety is not ink beneath the skin displaying a verse of Quran, while the person who bears it neglects the actual practice of what that verse commands. There is one more dimension to this conversation that intellectual honesty requires us to address. In certain cultures with Muslim majorities, traditional tattooing has existed for centuries, certain Amazigh Berber communities, certain communities across the Middle East and North Africa, certain tribal communities in Sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia. These tattooing practices predate Islam's arrival in those regions in many cases. What does Islam say about this? The rule is clear. Islam abrogates cultural customs that contradict the Sharia. Culture does not override revelation. Custom does not override the authenticated Sunnah. Where a cultural tradition involves permanent decorative tattooing, that tradition is to be set aside after Islam is embraced and after the ruling becomes known. However, and this is a significant however, children who were tattooed in infancy or early childhood according to cultural tradition, without their own consent, without their own choice, are not held accountable for what was done to them. An adult who cannot undo what was done to their body in childhood, who learns the Islamic ruling as an adult, and responds with sincere acknowledgement, is not bearing a sin for what they did not choose. The responsibility follows the choice. Where there was no choice, there is no sin. Let me close by addressing something that skeptics sometimes raise. Is this prohibition arbitrary? Is this just an old cultural preference that got codified into religious law? Is there a genuine wisdom behind it? The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, embedded the answer directly in the hadith itself. Those who alter the creation of Allah. This is the hikmah. This is the wisdom. Islam presents your body not as your own absolute property to do with as you wish, but as an amanah, a trust. Allah created this body and entrusted it to you. You are its guardian, not its owner in the ultimate sense. And there are conditions on how you manage that trust. One of those conditions is this. You do not alter what Allah gave you permanently, irreversibly, simply because a trend told you to, simply because an aesthetic preference changed, simply because you wanted to fit in with a culture that may itself be far from the values of your Lord. Think about what a permanent tattoo actually is philosophically. It is a statement that says, what Allah created on my skin is not enough. I need to add to it. I need to change it. I need to mark it in a way that can never be undone. And this permanent alteration is being made on the basis of a fashion trend, a mood, a relationship, an idea of who you wanted to be at age 19. 20 years later, fashions change. The tattoo does not. Relationships end. The tattoo does not. The person you were at 19 becomes someone you barely recognize. The tattoo remains. The permanence that makes it a sin is also what makes it a practical trap. Islam is not against beauty. This point cannot be overemphasized. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, wore fine garments. He used fragrance. He kept his appearance clean and well-groomed. He explicitly said that Allah is beautiful and loves beauty. Islam does not ask you to be aesthetically indifferent to yourself. But there is a categorical difference between taking care of the body Allah gave you and permanently altering that body out of vanity, trend following, or the desire to conform to standards that have nothing to do with Islamic values. Let me be precise and clear. First, a permanent tattoo made by personal choice for decoration or self-expression is haram. The hadith is authentic. The scholarly consensus is established. There is no credible scholarly dissent on this point. Second, temporary body decoration, henna, stick-on designs, surface-level body art that fades, is not in the prohibited category of al-washm. It is permitted, provided the imagery itself is Islamically acceptable. Third, medical tattooing, radiotherapy markers, post-mastectomy reconstruction, medical camouflage of significant scarring, falls under the principle of al-darura, necessity. It is permitted in genuine medical contexts. Fourth, a person who already carries a permanent tattoo, acquired before Islam or in genuine ignorance of the ruling, is not condemned. Sincere tawbah is sufficient. Removal is not obligatory. Prayer and wudu remain valid. Fifth, tattooing religious content, Quranic verses, or the names of Allah does not constitute a permissible exception. Good intention does not override prohibition, and the practical problems created by sacred text in states of impurity add an additional layer of concern. Allah Azza wa Jal said in Surah Al-Isra, verse 36, "And do not pursue that of which you have no knowledge. Indeed, the hearing, the sight, and the heart, about all those one will be questioned. Make your decisions with knowledge. Make them with awareness of what stands behind them and what stands ahead. If you are considering a permanent tattoo, ask yourself honestly, is this a genuine necessity? Or is this a trend, an impulse, a desire to look a certain way to a certain crowd? The fashion will change. Your skin will not. And if you already carry what you carry, do not let shame or guilt become a barrier between you and Allah. Turn to Him. He is closer to you than you imagine, and His mercy is wider than any mistake you have made. Seek knowledge from those who have it, not from influencers chasing engagement, not from scholars for hire who specialize in telling people what they want to hear, from people with real grounding in the texts, real accountability, and real fear of standing before Allah having misled His servants. May Allah grant us clarity in our deen, courage in our practice, and sincerity in our hearts. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.